Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another episode of You Gotta Meet, where today my guest is Julie Cole. She's got one of those bios that I had to cut down because she's so impressive, because she is a dynamic entrepreneur, recovered lawyer, a mom of 6, we're going to get into that, who traded in her legal career to co-found Mabel's Labels, a company that transformed from a basement startup into a multi-million-dollar industry leader. She's an award-winning businesswoman, best-selling author, and in-demand speaker, and her achievements have earned her so many notable recognitions, including the RBC Women of Influence Award for Excellence in Entrepreneurship. Not only that, though, beyond business, Julie is deeply committed to community engagement, to mentoring emerging entrepreneurs, and advocating for women's rights. That is just a snippet of who this incredible woman is. Ladies and gentlemen, you got to meet Julie Cole.
Hey.
Hey. It's funny. I love these podcasts where you meet somebody who you've never met before. And that's the way I try and do it, to go into conversations mainly with strangers and have that vibe with somebody like we just talked for the last 10 minutes. And you are so my kind of person. I just love your energy.
We are so hanging out next time, and I'm in NYC. Yeah.
That's a deal. That is a deal. I kind of feel like NYC is not the same since you moved away. It's just not quite as cool as it used to be.
I do come fairly regularly, though. I do. I'm there
you?
fairly. Yeah, I usually have work stuff there a few times a year anyway. So.
Well, it's funny because when we were talking about your stint in New York, when you're going to NYU, and of course, we're going to get into some of the things that you've done with your business and with your life and with your family. So along the way, it reminds me of something that my friend Alan said to me, and he is a very successful radio DJ, and he was speaking at an event one time for me, and he said, the person who dies with the most stories wins. And I just love that he had said that. And so it made me think of all your travels and all the stuff you've been up to over the last however many years. What's one of your favorite stories to share, whether it's a business story, a life story, a family story? What's one that comes to mind?
Oh, I do love that. And I like, to your friend Alan, I might throw it to the Wayback Machine, because I do love a good story, and I never let the truth get in the way of a good story either, right?
Right. Yes.
But
totally.
I do, when I think about how I'm raising my 6 kids now, and, I've got 5 at college, they're all big now. The youngest is in high school. He's at driver's ed right now. And it's so interesting to take this time to actually reflect on what I was doing in those times. And, I see how different things are now with social media and with, I think mostly parents being very safety obsessed and that sort of thing. And I think about how, when I was 19, I was hitchhiking around Europe, and, I was working way northern Ontario for the MNR in the middle of nowhere with no electricity. And then if I had a day off, I'd put my thumb at the side of the highway and go 4 hours to visit my sister who was at another park working up there. Just all those things. And there were so many inventors like that. And it does make me a little bit sad that I feel like these risks aren't being taken, because as you know, as an entrepreneur, you have to have a bit of an appetite for risk. And I think that goes along with life too.
Yes, this is so true. I mean, you and I were just chatting before we started recording today, and I was telling you about how I had recently come to a moment in my life as an entrepreneur where I could either double down on my bet or I could fold. And if anybody in my life had seen me fold, everyone would have said, completely normal, no judgment. You've already burned through a ton of money to get this business to where it is. And in order for me to double down the bet, as I was telling you, it was going to require that I sell my house in order to buy some runway and reinvest in this business. And I know that to the people who are watching this right now, that sounds insane.
Yes,
but
it does.
You know what? It's like you just get to the point where I find that the more you, as you say, hitchhike, the more that you take risks, the more that you throw yourself out there, the more you realize it's actually not as scary as everyone says it is. And so, what's one of the scariest things that you look back at and that you've done and you think, oh my God?
Yeah, look, I think that's a really good point because having that, for people who are risk adverse, this is really scary stuff. And I do think for you, Stuart, like at the time, when I did some of this stuff when I was younger, I was like, well, you know what, like it would suck if I died and whatever. Like my parents would be sad, but it's not like I had children who would actually be quite impacted by, But I think about you taking these kinds of risks when you actually have a partner who must be equally as insane, and you have children, so the risks do feel heavier when you have other humans relying
Yes.
on you. That's for sure. We definitely experienced this at Mabel's Labels, right? So I started this company with three other women, and it was a situation where, I was a lawyer and I'd gone to school for a long time and it was hard. So there was that. And then, my sister was a teacher, and then the two others were friends of ours from uni, and one was a financial planner and one was a graphics person. So, I mean, great. We all had lots of skill sets and whatever. But, for our Irish immigrant grandparents who just wanted us to have stable jobs, like they just wanted everybody to be a teacher so that they knew they had a good pension and they knew so this was like, my grandfather was just like, what is this madness that is going on? And, it was a really big decision at the time to leave our respective careers to make labels in a basement. And people romanticize entrepreneurship, and it looks really, really like working in a basement making labels till 2 a.m. and then getting up with kids at 6 and
Sexy.
doing all that, right? Like it's really not sexy the way they make it think. They make it think it's going to be all like TED Talks and book deals and
Yeah.
and and a lot of your
Yep.
listeners know there's really nothing that glamorous about it, especially in those early days when you're really digging in and
Those.
bootstrapping and all that jazz, right? Like you're doing without holidays, you're not able to buy that new car, you're like, no kids, you can't
Hmm.
play football and do ballet, you pick one.
Yeah.
So there
Yeah.
are there are a lot of sacrifices. So I think that was one big thing in the past, because Mabel's Labels launched 22 years ago, to pivot from having like a very like good potential career with good money to make labels in a basement just look like madness, particularly. And
It's
I do
crazy.
think this happens generationally, right? Like, our parents are coming from wartime, or our grandparents and they want a better life. So they want that sort of stability. And this kind of goes against all of their values around that, which can
Yeah.
be very difficult.
And this is why I think it's so difficult for so many people to even make any type of decision that is not congruent with the life of their parents or their grandparents. And it's funny, when you were talking about your Irish grandparents, it reminded me of what I now see as a funny time in my life, where I just graduated with an honors business degree from one of the better business schools in Canada. And I'm having lunch, and it's the celebration of my end of my university career. And my British immigrant parents who came to Canada with $150 are sitting across the table. And I said, listen, I've got this really great idea. I now know what I want to do with my life. I'm going to write musicals.
You did
And
not do that to your parents.
I mean, they just like their head popped right off their shoulders, especially my mother.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those like, hold on, no, you are the only out of the three boys. There's only ever been three of you that's ever gone to college or university. You now have a business degree. This is simple. Like, you just go out there and you just get a job. You work your way up the
Go
ranks within
print the
20 years.
money. Go print
That's
the
right.
money.
Yeah, that's right. Get the health plan.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
so I just, and of course, in the first 10 years of my, I guess, entrepreneurial career, there were all those sacrifices that you mentioned. The one thing that always stuck with me was friends of mine who would be getting married in destination weddings, and I could never go. Right. I couldn't afford it. And all my friends who had gone and got the corporate jobs, they were now going out there. And so, look, there's a yin and yang to everything. And I'm not bashing corporate jobs at all, because those people got to go to those weddings and I didn't. They got a car way before I did. They got a cell phone way before I did. So there's definite benefits to these kinds of things. But man, it's like, it is a journey and a half. Now, that makes me think though. So you obviously, like, I know you're not the kind of person that is going to go out there and brag about yourself. However, you can't not look back at this life that you've had, where you started off in a basement making labels, having 6 children along the way, turning it into a big company. There's got to be like so many things that you look at and you're like, I'm kind of badass. So what do you love about yourself? And today I'm going to give you the permission to brag.
I what do I love about myself? Okay, so I think I love that I'm okay with myself. Like I'm okay. with the stuff that I'm not great at. I accept myself. I can learn things, but if it's too hard, I'm okay with that too. I like to hire people that are smarter than me. I like that I can leave my ego at the door because I think that helps with like business and growth. And I do like the things that I'm good at. I like that I'm great with people.
Right.
I get a lot of enjoyment out of that, and I love that. Although I feel like it's unfair sometimes. I feel like sometimes those of us who are extroverted and kind of good at the people stuff get rewarded in traditional ways that people who are excellent introverted leaders or introverted children don't get rewarded the same way. And I'd like to see that we're learning a little bit more about that and the value that they bring to the table, because I do feel like I have been that person who's been rewarded my whole life for my personality, like I was a
Right.
kid who was voted valedictorian. I was a kid who won the speech contest in grade 4, like that. Those are the sort of things. And I felt like I always got a lot of recognition just
Mhm.
because of like the way I was born. And I think there's a lot of privilege that I got from that. And I do like to acknowledge that, right? And I also
Mhm.
like to acknowledge that around my entrepreneurship, right? Like I did start in the basement. It was tough, whatever, but I had a partner who made money,
Yeah.
and we could still have the house, and we could
Right.
still pay for the kids, and we could still do those things. So when everybody's like, oh, Julie, rah rah, you're so brave, I'm like, yeah, but I also had like good parents and a law degree. Like, yeah, I'm brave, but my stakes weren't as high as some
Right.
entrepreneurs. And I do like to take a minute to acknowledge that, because that often gets lost in all the hooray, you're amazing crap.
I agree with you
Yeah.
so much there, and it's funny. Another like correlation between you and I. So I have a twin brother, and when I grew up, and still to this day, we are very different individuals. We're fraternal, and but I was the same as you, winning the speech competitions, valedictorian of the school, and he was more of a introvert, more of a quieter guy, and didn't always get like win the popularity contest,
Right.
And so I saw firsthand, how it was that I was always the one being celebrated and the one that was kind of like, in the school newspaper, where he was not. And yet I knew, because I knew him so well and still do, that he brought so much to the table.
Yes.
And it was such a
Yes.
great learning lesson, right? That we have to realize that sometimes the loudest person in the room and sometimes the person who, let's say, is the funniest or the best looking maybe isn't the individual that we should be deferring to for all of their expertise, and to like maybe open our mind to the other individuals in the room who are laying quiet.
I love
And
that.
I see this now with my
Yeah.
son and my daughter.
Yes.
My daughter is me, and my son is not me. He's
Right.
he's mom, and he is the quiet one. And I'm constantly like trying to prop him up. I'm like, no, no, no. He's just as awesome as my daughter.
Exactly.
Everyone. You don't have to keep congratulating her. I mean, you must have gone through that with 6 kids. You've got like a whole football
Yeah,
team.
for sure. And even with my siblings, but it's so interesting because like my siblings, like when I started the company with, and she was like, I am not doing a podcast. Like she's so happy that I would do all this crap, because she was like behind the scenes and loved it that way. And like my sisters would be like, Julie, order a pizza for us when they were teenagers, or Julie, like, who's going to send my food back if I don't like it if Julie's not around? Because I was like the spokesperson too. So they were
Yeah.
quite happy to
Right.
have me around to be their little puppet as well, and do their hard work, like nasty work sometimes. So
Yes.
it is hilarious how some people are just behind the scenes. And I do think that like whatever we are, there's no one way that's better. Like I see it now with like, empathetic leaders, and like I see it in leadership and how much value different types of leadership bring to the,
Yes.
and just and like you say, to the point with the kids, and with 6 of them, like I see how every one of these humans brings so much value to our family, and in different ways.
That's it. That's it. So now you've got obviously a significant amount of confidence. Looking back, do you ever find yourself looking at periods of your life where you doubted yourself, you doubted your abilities, and that you didn't think maybe you belonged at the table? Anything like that ever happened to you?
So, I mean, sure. I mean, not at any sort of rate that would be, debilitating or stop me from trying. I do
Okay.
think that like self confidence is a gift that parents give their children through so many ways that is just not celebrated enough. Like, people are always like, oh, I want my kid to be gifted. I'm like, no, you don't. You want a B student who gets invited to birthday parties, because usually if there's giftedness, there's a deficit somewhere else, right? You just want
Right.
good, average kids. So I think like for me, when I reflect on the things that like I said kind of earlier, like I was okay with the things I wasn't great at.
Mm,
Sure, I would have liked to have been a better, dancer, singer, whatever, but I was
sure.
okay enough at everything. Like I always seem to
Right.
be okay at everything. And
Hmm.
and that piece of acceptance, I think, is key.
Right.
And that's why, like, I've got so many friends who talk about imposter syndrome and how they suffer
Hmm.
from imposter syndrome. And I'm like, I just kind of don't, because, like, I did make the labels in the basement at 2 a.m. Like,
Yeah.
I'm here because I worked my ringer off. Like, this is not,
Totally.
like, I belong here. Why,
Yep.
why not? Right?
Yeah. I always remember some famous actor who was being interviewed, and he was being, touted as, like, you are now considered one of the top three actors in the world. And they said, what is it like to be so talented? And he came back and he said, look, I appreciate that. And I know, of course, I have to have a certain level of talent to be here. He
Sure.
says, but the truth of the matter is, he goes, I'm here because I just worked harder than most people. He says, when you were sleeping, I was working. When you were eating, I was
Right.
working. And that's something, like, I've always said that entrepreneurs, and not just entrepreneurs, people in general, no matter what it is that they want from life, whether they want to start a successful company, whether they want to move up the ranks within their corporation, whether they want to fall in love with their dream partner, once you achieve that thing, it shouldn't be surprising to you.
Right.
Right. You should look back and go, "Oh, that is exactly what should have happened because
That was
I
the
worked my
plan.
ass off." Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a
Yeah.
friend who told me that she wanted to meet the man of her dreams, and she was online dating, and she said, I had decided I was going to do 100 dates.
Oh
And
God.
I was going to do it. I know, it's crazy. And she said I was
She
going to
could
do it,
write
I
a
think,
book. I bet you she could write a
yeah,
book and
she
should
should.
write a book.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
should. Because she was a militant about it. She would be saying to people in advance, first of all, dates are only 30 minutes. They're in coffee shops. I
Good.
want you to know they're back to back. I have people coming in after you. And she thought, if this is a problem for you, you're probably not going to be a good fit for me. And I think it was something like date 64. After a couple of months, she met the man of her dreams, and no big surprise, married
Oh.
and kids. And
Ah,
so it goes, like, but it shouldn't be a surprise to her. It's like
right.
so many people you meet
That
and
was
they're
the
like,
goal.
well, oh my God, I went on 2 dates last year. It was exhausting. So I'm taking the year off. And I'm like, you know what? I don't know why you're single. Can't figure it
She
out.
approached it like a job, right?
Yeah,
Like it was
that's
her
right.
job. And like she did the work. And it was funny because a friend recently had her book launch party and she, did her thank yous. And at the end, she's like, and I'd really like to thank myself. I worked really hard on this. I stayed up late. I still got this done. And I was just like, yeah, you go, girl. You thank yourself.
That's exactly it. Have you ever seen Snoop Dogg's award acceptance where he does this? He does the same thing. He's like, he doesn't thank anybody. He gets up and he goes, "Hi, everyone, thank you." And it's a big award, like a Grammy. He's like, I'd like to thank myself." And then he goes on, and the same kind of thing. I think that's
I'm so Googling
brilliant.
this when this is over.
You have to. You have to.
I love that.
So now,
That's a great vibe.
did you have so were there any, like, I mean, I think people watching and listening to this might think, oh my God, she's worked hard, but yes, everything's always gone perfect for her. But, like, of course we know that's not true. What about your childhood? Did you ever have any difficulties growing up or any setbacks?
So, I'm gonna say, like, I did have, like, really loving parents.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but we had a thing where, one of the moms on our court, we lived on a nice court in suburbia,
Mm-hmm.
and she was young and she got Lou Gehrig's disease.
Oh no.
And, in the summer, her kids, they were twins, actually, her daughters, and we always played on the street in the ravines and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And suddenly they were like having to help with mom, and they were kids, right? And
Mm-hmm.
then sometimes with the windows open in the summer, we could hear mom crying in pain. And I was
Oh.
like, 11 or 10 or something. And that did spark some anxiety in me. And
Mm.
we didn't know then what it was because nobody really paid attention to it. Be like, Julie doesn't want to be away from, like, my mom went back to teaching and I was like, no, mom, you need to be at home. I always wanted to be connected to her and know where she was at all times. And I didn't even know at the time that it was because, we had just gone through this with the neighborhood mom. And I was just so consumed with worry about my mother getting sick.
Mm.
And, that was really a meaningful time in my life because I can remember it so well and so raw. And at the end of the day, I feel like that experience really helped me parent better. Like I really had a lot of empathy for when my kids felt something. I was like, they are feeling this. Like this is not
Right.
like, like when you've experienced it yourself. Like I used to get shin splints when I was a kid, and my daughter Posey's an athlete, and she would get shin splints. And I remember thinking, if I didn't know actually how painful this was, I'd be like, oh gosh, let me give them a little rub, you're fine. But I was like, I was so
Right.
thankful I had experienced how painful it is so that I could relate to that. So when my kids were anxious about something, I felt like I really dealt with it well.
Right, right. That's
You know?
really a great way of reframing it, and it's just a great example of how in life, when we go through our own pain, it just makes us better teachers, and as you say, more empathetic. And I was watching this child who was just wailing yesterday, being taken away from the playground, and my partner turns to me and she's like, for that child, this is the worst moment of their life compared to, the last 6 days.
Yeah.
This is so traumatic, and it is important as parents that we try to really understand that. My daughter is an extremely sensitive girl, and she's 9 years old. And I struggle with this because I do come from that old school, stiff upper lip background,
Mm-hmm.
which is be like, oh, come on, stop crying. It's ridiculous, And so I have to grapple with that. I have to really
Right.
work on that because
Because it
I
doesn't
am
work.
now
You've never said to a child, stop crying, and they stop crying, right? Like it's just
right.
never happened. And I find that too, like really, I like your point, like what your partner said about like this is really a big deal to this kid leaving the park. And I can remember with Daddy, like sometimes like if the boys were playing like Minecraft or something, he'd be like, I said dinner was ready, and he'd come and shut their laptop. And I'm like, dude, you need to understand what you just did is like them shutting your Zoom meeting with the CFO of one of the companies you're working for.
A great
Like
way of putting it.
that's how big it is. And he's like, oh. And he's like,
Right.
they're crying over a video game. I'm like, no, you need
Yeah.
to remember this is reframe it into an 8-year-old brain. And,
Mhm.
so always just trying to be like relate things. Yeah, it's
It's
tough,
a
but
good point.
like you said, this is a big deal for them. And I just do
Yeah,
think that when you have a lived experience, you can bring those insights with you, whether it
that's
be at
right.
work
That's right.
or in your family. And so often I find family and entrepreneurship are so aligned. Like there's
Yeah, that's
so many
it.
things in common. Like I'm growing a
Oh yeah.
company and I'm growing a family and
Hmm.
same issues.
Yeah, it's so true. They're a
Yeah.
bunch of little employees. I heard, but on the flip side of all this, one of the things that does drive me crazy, I'm sure it does for you too, are some of these people who are on Instagram, these parenting kind of gurus, and some of the advice that they give, because it seems to me it's the exact opposite of what we're talking about, which is to say, okay, there's room always to try and understand and have greater empathy, but at the same time, there's also, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, there's always going to be room for a teaching moment, which is like, get off your goddamn video
Yeah.
game. And this woman was talking about when siblings get into fights and screaming and yelling at each other, and her response was like, there's so many different ways that you can approach this. And one of the things that she had said was like, I think that it'd be one example would be to come up to your children and to say, listen, I can see that things aren't working out for you guys right now. What do you think about we have a quick dance party? And I went, does she have kids? Like,
I just be like, you guys got to go outside and do this because I don't want to listen to it anymore. Or can
that's
you take it to
right.
the basement? Or I'll be like, I'm going for a walk. You guys sort it out. Yeah.
Same.
I mean, with 6 of them, like there were times. Obviously, I remember by the end of summer, after having the summer together, I called them the Bickersons. Right? Like that's what happened. But I often tell parents, you have to like honestly, it goes away overnight, and you just are like, I don't even remember that. Like my kids are like
Right.
besties, and
Oh,
I
what
don't
an
even remember
accomplishment.
the bickering. Like it is wild. And
That's crazy.
I know it happened because I called them the Bickersons, but I can't
Right.
remember that.
The
Right.
Bickersons. That's the
Yeah.
best. Someone's going to steal that.
Yeah.
So now, have you, as you've journeyed along this path, you've interacted with so many different people. Have there ever been people that you've found like just really disappointed you along the way?
For sure. Like I think, people disappoint you in your personal life, people disappoint you in business, people disappoint you as perhaps a supervisor or as a team member. Those things happen, but I think for me, I don't let it get to me. Like like I can be disappointed, but what am I going to do with that? Right? Am I going to let it,
Right.
am I going to rage about it? Am I going to let it live rent free in my brain and occupy
Mm,
really good, productive space that I need? It's just not worth it. So if somebody disappoints me, I'll just be like, okay, well, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them and
yeah.
move on. And also, you know what? I always come from a place of, I don't know what's going on in their life, right? Like you don't
Yeah.
know, like somebody disappoints you, you don't know what they're carrying around. So I really try to come from a place of non-judgment and the fact that just because sometimes somebody does things differently to you, maybe that's not a disappointment. Maybe that's something you need to learn about them,
Yeah.
that, they do it differently. And I feel like, for me, making mistakes and like it's very that it is how we learn, and there's no shame around learning. And I disappoint myself. I disappoint my kids. Disappoint's a funny word, but we make mistakes. And
Right.
I just am a big fan of role modeling. Like, hey, I don't think I got that right, and this is
Yeah.
what I've learned from it, and this is what I'm going to do next time. And I
Mm,
found, like, being transparent like that, my kids aren't afraid to apologize. They don't lie because it's safe to tell me the truth because they're not going to be in trouble, right? So
right.
it's just very transparent. And then the same for me. I give myself the grace when I disappoint myself or do something
Mm,
and I'm like, I could have done better. I often joke that I gave up mom guilt 5 years ago. It's not productive. It's not
right.
helpful. So I've
Hmm.
learned from it. And then I make a better choice the next time. That's all we can
So
do.
great. You know something I'm really struggling with as far as being disappointed in people? It's people who don't respond to emails. And it's like,
Oh,
especially when they start the conversation, they'll
oh,
reach out and they'll say, "Hey, do you? I want to
ghosting.
get some information." Yeah, the whole ghosting thing. And
Look, there's a whole bunch of things I think people do inappropriately. Like, I
right,
just did a LinkedIn live yesterday and I was talking about all the things that like annoy the heck out of me on LinkedIn. Like, don't connect with me and then slide in my DMs asking to give me a gift card for lunch and selling to me, or don't, like I've got a whole list of, and like ghosting of that. So yeah, there are a
yeah,
lot of things like that are general disappointments, but I'm not disappointed in those people because I don't have a standard for them. I don't have
right,
expectations for them, right? So I'm just like,
totally,
they suck and that's going to come out. Like
yeah,
their karma is going to, like, they're not going to get clients. They're not going to get, good
right.
relationships personally, like all of that stuff. So yeah, I don't let that drag me down. I just
That's
laugh
good.
and be like I will do, like if a PR company sends me a pitch to, like, they want me to try their product or whatever, or talk
Hmm.
about it on socials, and it's like a bad pitch, I like will sometimes go back and be like, hey, you might want to do this next time. Like, get my kids' names right, get my name right. Just don't give, like, I'm not disappointed in them. I'm just like, I'll turn it into a teachable.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I'm going to give you these top three boxes to check. This is how
Yeah.
you spell Julie. Okay. It's with a J. Yeah.
Oh,
It
funny.
is amazing. I
Yeah.
keep finding myself in situations like this where I'm wondering now more and more, have people become just so busy that they
Mhm.
can't get some of the basics right? Like they can't just say, "Hey, oh, you know what? I reached out to Stuart. I asked him a question. He got back to me and gave me the answer and then asked me what I thought of the answer. And I just decided I'm just not going to respond." you
I
know,
do think, you know what? I think there are, Stuart, to your point, I think there are a lot of methods of communication. And I do, when people slide in my DMs on LinkedIn or Instagram, I'm like, dude, you need to email me because I can't manage it all.
right.
I'm running a big company. I've got all these humans. I'm like, I can't be watching my DMs, my email, my whatever. Like, it's everywhere. My WhatsApp,
Mhm.
it's everywhere. So I'm always
Yeah.
like, I need one central spot. And if I miss something, I'm usually pretty good. And I also manage my productivity. I have tips, I have tools that I use
Right.
to make sure I don't ghost people. And the odd
Yeah.
time it happens, again, I'll apologize and move on. Sorry about that. But I do think, yeah, people are busy, but they're busier. You can use busy as an excuse to do whatever you want. Like, I could say I'm too busy to work out, right?
Right.
Or I'm too
Yeah.
busy to write my book. I use that for a long time. The fact of the matter is, we do the things that we want to do. So if
Yes.
you want to respond to everybody, if that's important to you, if that's a core value around customer service or human interaction, then
Hmm.
you're going to do it. That's
Yeah.
just the end of the day, right?
It
How that
it has
works.
to be, yeah. I think you have to make things important as opposed to people making them important for you. I see this a lot with. It's so funny. The school that my kids go to, it's a public school, and they take attendance, and they also take, they mark down when you're late. But those lates and that attendance is not really considered until you get to grade 5, and then they're going to then look at that when they're choosing, what kids get to go into what middle schools in the city. And so what's fascinating is that you see this cohort of the exact same families every single day coming 5-10 minutes late, which I've always found that to be interesting. It's like, you just have to start 5 or 10 minutes earlier.
Remarkable, isn't it? Yeah.
Right. And so they're saying, well, it's not important right now because it's not being counted. But you can be sure that as soon as those kids go into grade 5, those families will now start making it important. And I think that you don't need to wait for those moments in life to happen. You just have to stop and ask yourself, how can I make this important? Well, okay, is it important for that teacher to have all the students in class at the same time so they don't get disrupted? Yeah, that's important. Am I teaching a great lesson to my children about the importance of being on time?
100%, Stuart. That's what I'm saying. I'm like, when you're saying this, I'm like, why are these parents not trying to create habits with these kids? Why are they saying it's okay for people to be waiting for you? You're special enough that you can
Right.
hold everyone up, right?
Yes.
And like, why can't they get organized in the morning? Is it the parents are doing too much? Maybe you need to work on some independence routines at home, get those mornings going more smoothly. There's work to be done here. But yeah,
Right.
you don't just do the things because now it's required.
I know.
Yeah.
You know what I've always found incredible is that when you go to a theater show or maybe a concert or whatever it may be, and how often the show says it starts at 7:30, and then they let the latecomers in till about 10 minutes after, and then they usually start the show 10-15 minutes late. And I always take my time to look around the room and kind of get a sense of how filled the room is. I'm like, yeah, you've got about basically 99% of the people here out of the 1,000 seat theater that we're in. But no, we're gonna hold those 900 and whatever 90 people off for an extra 10 minutes just to reward the individuals. And I thought, you know what? You do realize that if you were to implement a rule that person doesn't get to take their seat until intermission,
Yeah.
guaranteed the behavior changes.
100%. And you're rewarding bad behavior. I mean, we know this with kids, right? Like,
Right, yes.
why would I reinforce and reward them for the behavior I don't want to see?
That's right. I often say to my partner, I'm like, please, whatever you do not say you're going to take something away from the child unless you are absolutely going to take that away from the child. We go through this all the time.
Dude, you are speaking my language. And you got to keep in mind, dude, like my first kid was diagnosed with autism. So
Okay.
I was very I never did 1, 2, 3 magic because they have to listen to me first time, not when I get to 3. And, if I am not going to fulfill a consequence, I don't say it. And sometimes I would be mad at myself because I'd be like, darn it, like say I'm breastfeeding a baby. I'm like, you need to sit down off, don't jump on the couch or whatever. And then they keep jumping. Then I have to stop feeding because I need to follow through. So if I'm not prepared to follow through, I actually wouldn't give the instruction.
Right.
And that is one that, parents don't always get right.
Oh my gosh. I always find myself thinking, at some point you do realize you're going to have to do the work, right? So you can be their best friend right now and you can give them all kinds of sweets and treats and not have to discipline them. But eventually, it's not like you can circumvent this. There's going to be a time where the kid's going to be like, can someone be a goddamn alpha in the room? And can someone teach me how to live my life and stop letting me be the one who makes the decisions?
It's so funny because I talk about this too, about how today's problem solvers are tomorrow's leaders. So let them have practice when they're 9 and they forget their lunch. Guess what? They don't have a lunch that day. They're only going to forget their lunch once. It's not a punishment. It's like, oh, sorry, I'm at work, babe. I can't help you out. But I'll help you with a strategy. So tomorrow morning, let's put a list of things you have to remember to do independently before school. I will never rescue. I'm not going to drop off a gym outfit because a kid forgot their gym clothes. They can sit on the bench because that's how they learn.
Exactly. I had a bit of hate mail came through from a recent podcast where I was telling a story about how I recently chose to not attend my daughter's dance recital. And so now you have to understand that I have attended many dance recitals, and you will not find a parent who's screaming and yelling and hooting and hollering more than me in the audience. However, I had seen that she was not rehearsing. We had asked her many times to practice, and she was sloppy. And I knew that this was not going to be a great performance. And I said, honey, I'm not coming. And she's like, why? I'm like, because you haven't tried. We've tried to get you to try. You're not taking it seriously. You're going to go to your recital. We're not going to stop you from doing it. But if you want us to be there cheering you on, you have to understand that you have to put in the hard work. Well, I mean, you can imagine the
Oh
number
yeah,
of parents.
that would not go over well in this parenting environment.
No,
Right
it's
now,
like,
to
oh God.
2025, it's like, you're
Oh yeah.
perfect just as you are. I'm like, I don't even want, I'm like, participation awards do not come in this house. They're just dust collectors.
Tell me about it. I'm the exact same way. So it sounds like you've had like a lot of like great influences in your own life, whether it's parents, grandparents, cousins, aunts. Is there anybody that maybe you is no longer or either around, or somebody that doesn't maybe live in the country anymore that was a big influence in your life that you miss, and what do you miss about them?
So I would say it's actually my grandma Lyons. So this is my mom's mom. She lived
Okay.
to 101, and she was born, she was one of, her mother had 21 kids in Ireland.
What?
So,
I didn't know that was possible.
I know. One set of twins, so 20 pregnancies.
Just one?
So just the one. Yeah, and they didn't
God.
survive. Four infants didn't survive, so great grandma raised 17 of them. So grandma was actually very much born before her time. So when we did start Mabel's Label, she was very like, you girls got this. When we won Women Entrepreneur, the award and limos and red carpet, you bet grandma was in that limo with us, coming to us to the big event.
God. Oh,
and she
I love
was
her.
Always very supportive and very wise, and always stayed really kind of with it. Never went like, in my day, always was like, I love how kids are so much more engaged right now, and there's more for them to do. They don't get bored the way my kids did. She was very
okay.
And she had a lot of, like little expressions and things that would were meaningful. So that's what I miss. I mean, she was the gal, and people are like, oh, how is it you've got this personality? I'm like, because she would say, you're as good as the rest of them and better than none, Julie. So I can do what everybody else can do, but no better. Like I'm just as worthy, but not more worthy.
Oh,
so things like that. And I had a cousin come out. He was living in Australia, and he wrote grandma a letter to come out of the closet. And here's this old Irish Catholic granny, right? And she was like 85 or 87 at the time. And she wrote him back and said, honey, a life in hiding is a life unlived. You need to be out of the closet. I wish you could have told me sooner. And I feel like that's the way, entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, like, we need to take up space,
Yes. Yeah.
We're not going to live a life in hiding, because that is a life unlived. So things like that. And just around gratitude, she always said, the reason I'm so happy is because I've never wanted anything I don't have. And I'm like, she had nothing. Like they they had, they were poor farmers, and they did fine. Actually, my grandma and my great grandparents were very, they were good farmers. They were entrepreneurial. They owned a pub, things like that. They were hard workers.
Yeah.
But she just never wanted for what she didn't have. And that kind of attitude is just brilliant, because honestly, Stuart, like, you can want, but the only thing you can control is your attitude.
Yeah.
And that
I find it so
make
interesting.
Or break you.
Big time. I just everyone talks about the importance of having a gratitude journal, and I've had one, and then of course 2 weeks goes by and I don't do it, right? But I find that sometimes when I am feeling like down, I just stop for a second and I'll just say, okay, I'm grateful for these things today, and you really find yourself pinpointing some of like the, I guess, non-sensational things, like, you know what, I'm glad that I feel nice that the person at the gym, they actually know my name. I'm grateful for that, right? And you start realizing, holy crap, like my life is pretty fantastic, and I just have to remind myself to see it in the way that your grandmother was able to realize that. She's like, I've got all that I need. Why would I not be happy? Why would I be depressed? Why would I put myself into a state of suffering?
I've got it. Yeah. Even like, she had a child who was quite disabled that, took up a lot of her, but she was like, this child's a joy. Like, she got so much joy. And that is like, everything is how you shape it. Like my mom always says, you decide whether you're going to be happy or not, and that's not, and not to be like toxically positive or anything like that. But I mean, for me, a practice is I don't complain. So like, I've never said I'm tired and like a bed appears, or like, somebody take my babies away and let me sleep all night. Like, like if I'm tired, then I need to make a change. I have to do something
Right.
proactive. So what is
Mm-hmm.
it? Maybe I need to get a babysitter. Maybe I need to go to bed earlier instead of staying at the Mabel's Labels office. Maybe I leave at 1 instead of 2 a.m.,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
whatever.
Right.
But, when you change that mindset from not complaining, it's amazing how the negativity seems to go away. And
Oh,
again,
I know.
because it's not productive and it's not proactive, it's just, I just don't do it.
Good for you. Good for you. Do you then, you were talking about how, more female entrepreneurs kind of need to speak up and stand up and like be who they are. What are ways that you find yourself commonly being misunderstood?
I think, I think what can happen now, this is maybe the other side of like that extrovert, social, lots of friends, that sort of thing, is that I found a lot of times people assume that they're like, well, I'm not going to invite Julie because I know she's so busy and I don't want her to
Mm-hmm.
feel like she has to turn up or whatever. And I'll find out after, I was like, dude, I totally would have popped by. I had nothing on. Or like,
Right.
I dropped the kids off at a birthday party and had 2 hours to kill. I would have popped in or
Yeah.
whatever. But because, I do share a lot on my socials about what I'm doing. I'm going, I'm seeing this gal. I'm doing, I'm out a lot. I do a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I am a busy guy. Right. So
Right.
a lot of people see that and then they'll be like, oh, I don't want her to feel obliged or I don't want to put the pressure on her. And I'll be like, don't tell me what I can and can't go to. I am quite happy to say I'm at capacity, I can't come, but don't
Right.
stop inviting me. And people made that assumption with the kids too, because there were a lot of kids, right? Like I had my kids close in age too, 6 C-sections, bam, 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 bam.
Boom.
So people would be like, well, she's so bogged down with the kids, like we won't, and then also when you have a lot of kids, like you stop getting invited to family things at around 4 because people don't want to like feed you or you take up the whole pool.
I never even thought about that, but that would
Yeah,
actually
like
be a thing. It was like, oh, well, we can't really have those guys.
100%. We're
Yeah.
like 3 families. Like most people have 2 kids, right?
Right.
And like my kids are like adventurous and loud and climb
Mm.
things, and I'm good with it. And
Yeah. Oh yeah,
so it
like you like the
was
Tasmanian devil family coming in. So 6
totally.
kids. I know you probably get asked so much about this, but I can't help but ask. Like, so was it one of those scenarios where you said, "Okay, I really want to have a big family," or was it more like, you know what, God, I'm pregnant again. Turns out I'm quite fertile.
Right. Yeah. No, I'm a big fan of like body autonomy and managing my own like reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
But I would say that we both, like Daddy-O and I, he's one of 5, I'm one of 4.
Okay.
And we probably knew we wanted more than 2. Like we
Right.
probably thought 3 or 4.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we'd have a baby and we're like, this is fine. We're fine. Let's have another. And then we'd have another and be like, oh, this is fun. We're fine. So I think, usually you have one partner who has the like, I'm done gene and says, we're done. We're not having any more.
Mm-hmm.
But because all my friends were like, you'll know when you're done. And I'm like, I don't have that gene.
Right.
And he didn't either.
Oh man.
So,
Okay.
Eventually I just got old and had too many C-sections, right?
Right. Yeah.
But yeah, so it wasn't.
So you could have kept going. Could we have hit 7 or 8? Is that was that?
I could have. Yeah, I always
Yeah.
wanted twins because then it would have from a productivity standpoint.
Right. You got to get ahead of the
1
game.
pregnancy, 1 C-section, 2 humans. But it was, yeah, also it is very much a personality thing. Like people are like, oh my God, my 2, it's too much. And I'm like, 2's a lot.
Yeah.
And, like 1 to 2 is hard. Like that's a big
Mhm.
leap, So I'm like, people are like, how do you manage? I can only do, my 2 are driving me crazy. I'm like, yeah, because you've got 2, right? But you
Right.
do have to have a certain personality. Like if I wanted a spotless house and pristine children and, beautiful meals and cared about a lot of stuff,
Mhm.
then I couldn't have done this, like I
Right.
couldn't have. But I was
Mhm.
fine with
Yeah.
like I never was that mom who like had to go in the closet and cry. Like my kids never made me cry. I never felt so overwhelmed, right? So that was lucky. And then when you are, like you stop. You have whatever, and there's no right number, wrong number. 0 is
Right.
perfect, 6 is perfect, 2 is
Mhm.
whatever works for you,
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah, but
That
this
is-
has been a blast. I got to tell you, like these 6 kids, what a blast! It's a jam.
Oh my gosh, I would
It's so
love
fun.
to meet the whole family one day. Like, do you
They're
guys? Is there a
awesome.
vehicle that can like carry all of you at the same
So
time?
back in the day, I had a Suburban, so
Oh, right.
it could fit 9 because we could flip the front seat, and we really only
Okay.
use that to like go to the cottage. But mostly, you're driving a hockey, and so it's really very much a divide and conquer situation.
Mm.
And now that like the youngest is in driver's ed right now. And,
Mm-hmm.
there's just a fleet of, I always say my fleet of crappy cars, like, because
Yes.
they're all at college or uni and
Right.
whatever. So they've got their crappy cars on the driveway coming and going and
Yeah.
whatever. I never know what day to day, how many people are home for dinner. Right now,
God.
I think 3 are living at home, 2 are away for the summer, one's in Australia right now. Like,
Wow.
it's
That's
wild.
I love it. I love
It's a
it. So,
blast.
so what is like from an entrepreneurial business perspective? And I know I haven't got much time left with you, so I want to get this in there. What are you most busy with there, outside of your family life? Are you trying to continuously grow the business, or are you finding yourself wanting to jump into new businesses?
Right.
What's exciting you there?
So, yeah, it has been 22 years. And it is so interesting because, like, now, I was saying earlier how sometimes, like, life and work are parallel. Like, your kids,
Mm-hmm.
so your kids grow up and even they're all home for Thanksgiving and they're all just like doing their thing, chit, 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 chit. And I walk in, I'm like, what are y'all talking about? They're like, yeah, yeah, this. And I said, gosh, I feel like kind of that outdated CEO who just goes to the office every day with a newspaper to feel important. Because I'm like, they're all grown and flown in a lot of ways, right?
Right.
And a lot of CEOs at this stage of their business are the same, right? And I think
Right.
that's an important place to be. Like, I don't know how to make a label. And I shouldn't know how to make a label, right? Like,
Right.
it's been
Yeah.
22 years. If I'm working in the business, who's working on the business, right? And we do have a general manager and we do have a production manager. I'm not even really looking like maybe the final, like, what new equipment do we want when it comes in and we're
Mm-hmm.
doing our strategic planning and stuff like that. But, I should be able to get hit by a bus in this company to do well without me. And it would. Like, it would
Yes.
be, like,
Right.
perfect. Just like my kids would be fine now, too. It wouldn't be
Mm-hmm.
great. It
Yeah.
wouldn't be great, but
It's
they'd
not
be okay.
ideal.
It's not
Are the
ideal.
other three ladies still involved?
No, I'm the last one. We actually went through an acquisition
Okay.
a few years ago, which was loads of fun. That's a whole other topic that I can speak to
Right.
for ages.
I bet.
And I stayed on. So I've stayed on since the acquisition because I do a lot of, like, I'm company spokesperson. So I do
Mm,
a lot of connecting with moms, connecting with customers. Like yesterday, I did like a Facebook Live where we were
right.
giving away our labels that were still hanging around and not, things like that. So a lot of speaking at conferences, like talking to folks like you and
Okay.
spreading the Mabel love out there, right?
Yeah. So you're loving it still. Like
I love
you
it.
still got like a lot of energy for it.
I really do. And you know what? If
Yeah.
I didn't, I'd go.
Yeah.
Because, like,
Have you ever wanted to
has
do
that
anything else? Or I guess you are doing other things though. You wrote a book and
I
you
do
know you do the
tons of
keynotes.
things. When
Right.
people
So
are
it's
like,
not just
what's your
Mabel's labels.
day? Like, tell me a typical day. And I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, no, I can't do
Yeah.
that.
Not
I
a
do a
chance.
ton of things. There's a lot of variety and I still connect like I had the whole marketing team here yesterday shooting content from back to school at my house,
Right.
like super fun stuff. I was in LA last week running a mom walk in Tustin, California. Like, there's so much variety. And I did do other things. Like, I did do law. I did,
Yeah.
I had a lot of, as you know, education. So
Hmm.
this has been, this has been a blast.
That's
And
amazing.
I would bail if I had had enough.
If yeah.
Yeah.
So what do you want the people that you work with or anyone that has ever had the chance to kind of be affiliated with your business, what do you want to be remembered for in the eyes of the people that you've worked with over the years?
I think really I would just want to be known for who I am. I hope they've learned the value of transparency, of being
Right.
authentic and being yourself, no false modesty, no ego, and how that can work for you. I hope they feel that I've, I always think that being a good leader is creating more leaders, right? So I feel
Hmm.
like I hope that the people that I've mentored have felt somehow empowered or more self confident to go forward. And I just feel like, when you walk through a door, don't shut it behind you, leave it wide
Yeah.
open. And that's what I'm trying to do.
Oh my gosh, I have no doubt that you have. And I have no doubt that if I were to speak to the people who have worked with you and continue to work with you, they would just be raving about that experience. And I would imagine that you've really been true to that because it emanates from you. And it really is just such a wonderful thing to be able to be a part of. Like I found myself as I've been speaking to you here, how really feeling genuinely honored to be able to have a connection with someone who's so special and someone who's really like clearly coming from the right place. And I mean, are we all perfect? No, but there's a perfection in the fact that you're continuously just trying to be your best, whether it's being a mom or a partner or a friend or, an employee of an organization. It just comes through crystal clear that you care. And so from that perspective, I can't tell you how honored I am that when I just reached out to you to the blue and say, hey, you want to be on my podcast? You said yes. So thank you so much, Julie. You are a total gem for being on the show.
Well, Stuart, thank you so much for having me. And you know what? It was your great questions. Like, that was really fun.
Awesome. Well, thanks for saying that. And that's what it's all about, right? We're just trying to create deeper human connections amongst people who are living with each other on this big bouncing ball in the middle of outer space. So for anyone who's been watching or listening, we will make sure that you get all of Julie's way, all the links and all the ways to be in touch with her and to follow her work and to start buying yourself some Mabel's labels if you're a parent out there, because I know that we've got them in our household. So make sure you guys get them too. And so thank you to all of you for watching and listening today on another episode of You Gotta Meet.